What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the broader markets. I'm going to talk about some key levels to watch for as time goes on, and why the market saw some interesting volatility looking at the current setups. Just know that I am not a financial planner. Take nothing I'm saying as financial advice whatsoever. Anyways, the market was basically trading sideways for most of the day. We gapped up and started to dip as time went on. And I talked about how if we lost some key support, there was a risk of us coming down to fill these gaps on SPY and the QQQ. But then we just continued to chop and we did not end up losing structure. And then we started to break structure to the upside instead. We talked about how if the QQQ broke past 706, I was looking for a pump. Same thing with SPY. We talked about how if this took out 735, we're looking for some temporary upside. And now the setups look quite decent heading into tomorrow. If we hold above our key supports, we could continue to squeeze on SPY. We could also squeeze on the QQQ. So I'm going to break down exactly what's going on. We also had a big announcement that came out from President Trump that also contributed to why the market was bouncing. We're also bouncing approaching SpaceX's IPO. So there's a lot of news that's coming out that's affecting the markets. And as a reminder, we have nice setups. Even Tesla has an inverse head and shoulders approaching SpaceX's IPO. If we take out $400, I also think that this could continue to squeeze. So I will talk more about these charts, but I first want to talk about some news and data. The first thing worth remembering is that we're getting some good news for a lot of stocks out there like AMD. AMD had Bank of America raise their price target from $500 to $560. So that is some good news, giving it a buy rating. We also saw more bullish pieces of news coming out. For example, we saw some news about how Bank of America is now seeing that the CPU markets can once again see a very big growth by about 37%. And they also talked about how it could be looking for an estimation of over $170 billion for the market. So that's some good news. They also increased their targets on Intel, and they also said that NVIDIA is like one of their top picks. So that's good news for a lot of semiconductor stocks. That's why we saw a bit of a bounce for them. Tomorrow's also going to be a big day as we have SpaceX's very important IPO. Now, we're getting lots of questions about this. I just want to say that first off, it's going to be a massive company, the biggest IPO in history. Right, the market cap is going to be $1.75 trillion, and people really want to get their hands on this. It's going to be listed on the Nasdaq, and this is going to be important because the listing price is about $135 per share. Now, I think that initially, when this comes out, when it goes IPO, there's going to be a lot of people trying to grab the shares. There's going to be a lot of buyers stepping in from both the retail side and from other sides. And I think that this may continue to try to push even higher. It's going to initially see a nice run. However, typically when you have IPOs with this much hype, they don't always maintain their green stance, right? We had lots of IPOs in the past that saw initial pumps only for them to reject, and then they ended up getting some negative returns as time went on. SpaceX has said they want to raise some equity, so there is a chance that if this the share price keeps on rising, they could try to dilute it to some extent, and then simultaneously they're going to try to raise more equity for future ventures and for their capexes. So will SpaceX pump? Yes, I think it's actually going to pump a bit. I think there's going to be a lot of people buying it up from 135. But the not so good news is that it's going to be more of like a pump and dump move. I think that initially it pumps, then it's going to see a big dump. And then as time goes on for the long term, it's going to likely continue to squeeze. I'm still quite bullish for the super long term for SpaceX, especially if there's a merger deal between SpaceX and Tesla. It's going to be massive, but we're not quite there yet. It could take many months until that truly happens. And this hype may just lead to a temporary bounce, followed by another sell off. There's going to likely be a big sell off coming. So keep that in mind. It's going to be a temporary move. Now, for the broader markets, SpaceX is not going to be the biggest catalyst. I did mention this in the Discord. I said that SpaceX is not going to be everything. SpaceX could incentivize more liquidity for the markets. It could help the QQQ bounce to an extent. It could lead to other stocks in the sectors to bounce. It could even help Tesla bounce, but the move will likely be temporary. And then what else will be affecting the market will be external factors. One of the external factors is what's happening between the US and Iran. Iran announced that the Strait of Hormuz is going to be completely closed to all oil tankers and commercial ships because they're very unhappy with the attacks that were taking place. The US claims their attacks were for self defense purposes, whereas Iran claims that they have to retaliate. And now Iran is essentially continuing to attack more countries in the Middle East. It's not the best of news. The tension is rising, unfortunately. So this is some negative news. But the reason why the market bounced was because we also had some positive news from the US. The good news is that President Trump said this. And I know people don't like politics. I do not intend on being political. I just want to be very unbiased and talk about why this is affecting the markets. President Trump said, based on the fact that discussions with Iran have been brought to the highest level of Iranian leadership and approved, I have, as the president, he canceled the scheduled strikes and bombings against Iran this evening. That's some massive news. He said discussions and final points have been in both concept and great detail approved by all parties. And then he talked about a lot of the parties that were involved. Then he was talking about the possibility of there being some kind of deal. And this is what he said. He talked about how a deal is to be expected. It's soon going to be finalized. However, Iran never confirmed that a deal has been reached. That's what President Trump keeps on saying. He also said that Iran, in the US, they had a lot of tensions. They were not happy with one another. President Trump did threaten more attacks against Iran initially. That's what spooked the markets to some extent. But now he is saying that the attacks have been canceled and that a deal could be finalized soon. So a big flip from President Trump, and that is what caused the market to bounce. That was one of the biggest catalysts. However, despite this news, it does not mean that there is a true deal between the US and Iran. That's the important thing to remember. The tensions keep rising, and Iran have blocked the Strait of Hormuz even more. So, for example, only 2 ships passed the Strait of Hormuz in the last 24 hours. There's no progress at truly reopening the Strait of Hormuz, in my opinion. It's just the same situation as before. We're still seeing the blockade, and the tensions are continuing to rise in the Middle East. So, this is going to be another factor. It could still affect the market more for the medium term. And then the biggest factor coming up for the markets is this. Okay, we have the very important FOMC meeting. It's going to be in 6 days from now, less than 6 days technically. There's a 98.5% chance the Fed has to keep rates the same because PPI and CPI were both quite hot. We saw the hottest inflation we've seen in almost 3 years, or a little over 3 years, I'd say, since like April of 2023. Inflation is on fire. Okay, the Strait of Hormuz is blocked. There's an energy crisis. Things are not good for everyday Americans. Things are not good for the global situation. And as a result of this, the Fed is in this stalemate phase. They can't raise rates way too much. They can't cut rates too much. We just have to keep rates as is, according to what we heard from many Fed officials. So, we have the new Fed chairman, Kevin Warsh. When you have a new Fed chairman, oftentimes it does spook the markets. And there is a risk that the market could see an increase in volatility, possibly some downside. We'll have to see how it goes, but that's not guaranteed just yet. So for the short term, the charts do look bullish with SpaceX's IPO and the hype and excitement alongside President Trump telling us that the strikes have been canceled. I think this is still more bullish and we could try to continue to squeeze temporarily. But this is not a long-term move. Despite volume going up, this is not a long-term move. This is just a temporary pump. And for us to push for a more sustainable period of time, what's going to matter more is FOMC. What's going to matter more is what happens involving Iran. The Iran situation is not over. Iran is still attacking more countries in the Middle East, and we have to wait and see what Kevin Warsh and the Fed have to say. So I just wanted to put that out there. That is what matters a lot more than just SpaceX's IPO. And SpaceX's IPO will likely be an initial pump with all the hype and the buyers that step in, followed by a dump. I think that's most likely what's going to happen. That's what typically happens during these big, massive pumps and these big hype rallies for IPOs. Tomorrow is going to be Friday, June 12th, 2026. Keep in mind at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, we have data from Michigan coming out involving the 5-year inflationary expectations and consumer consumer confidence. So expect some volatility at 10 a.m. And besides that, we're going to talk about the setups. And by the way, guys, if you guys want real-time setups, I just wanted to call out that on my Discord, I gave everyone alerts. I talked about what President Trump said. I talked about the bullish setup on SPY, on the QQQ, for example. We called out all of the moves. On Tesla, we called out the setup on AMD, right? We have Tesla, the QQQ, and the list goes on. So if you want real-time updates and pre-market analysis alongside my watch list for the market, you guys could check out my Discord. You guys could sign up and with the link in the description or at the top of the comment section. But if you're not interested, it's always okay with me. You'll always get these free videos anyways. So once again, I did call these setups in real time, but we need to see if we get a follow through move. That's going to be what we need for this to continue. So hypothetically, if we don't want to pump, if you want to be a bear tomorrow, just hypothetically, you want to see SPY reject and lose these EMAs over here. You want to see us turn back down, and you need to see SPY essentially get back below at least 735. If we lose 735, we're looking for 733. If that fails us, we could turn back down on SPY. That's the more bearish case. This could resemble a double bottom bounce, but that's going to be the more bearish case, losing like 733 to 730. But even if we do come down a little bit, you want to see us bounce near 735, and then you want to see us reclaim 740. Even if we dip a little bit, we could still try to reclaim 740. If we do, with the SpaceX hype and the news of President Trump canceling the strikes, it is still possible we squeeze for 744. That's the more bullish case. Okay, so watch your levels. If you hold above 737 and then break past 740, I'm looking for a push for 744. If we lose 735, we could dump to 733. If that breaks, we're going to be looking for the rug pull. So we're going to be unbiased traders. We're going to be in the middle, but the current setup is favoring that volume is picking up, momentum is building, and the market wants to go higher. That looks like it's a little bit more probable to me. The upside is looking more strong, and we have the possibility of maybe consolidating in the morning again. We'll see if we pull back a little bit before attempting to break 740 on SPY, then squeeze for 744. I think that's the most likely possibility. Not saying it's a forever move, just a temporary squeeze. On the QQQ, we look very similar. We're actually trying to bounce right here. Now, if we hypothetically lose 710, we could be dumping lower towards this 706 area. And if we lose 706, we could be looking for a retest of 697. Now, that's the bearish case. It does not look very likely. It does not look as likely right now. We look like we're trying to fill this imbalance, and this would take us back up towards the 720s. We have a nice looking double bottom setup on the QQQ. There's also a slight bullish divergence here. We bounced, made a higher low, and we're actually trying to break out right now. I want to see us hold above 715. If we do, we could squeeze for 720, then eventually closer to 725. Considering that tomorrow is SpaceX's IPO day, and considering that President Trump is announcing that he wants to cancel the strikes, there's a greater probability for upside than downside. Unless we end up losing like 710 and 706, we're actually favoring more upside. I would prefer if we hold 715. If we do, I could see us continue to squeeze for the 720s and then 725. So watch your levels and be unbiased as always, but that's what I'm essentially anticipating. The IW Russell 2000 has sort of like a triple bottom. See, we bounced off the bottoms. We also did not lose 288, which could favor a push for 293. So we're favoring more upside for 293. On ES, we have a triple bottom as well. We actually have an inverse head and shoulders like pattern. Technically, it is an inverse head and shoulders here. This favors upside. As long as we don't lose 73.86, the setup does favor 74.68 and 7,500. But we'll see, just to be safe, always be unbiased. NQ has an inverse head and shoulders. As long as we don't lose 29,200, we're looking for a squeeze back up towards 29,800. On Bitcoin, we have a triple bottom. Inverse head and shoulders, left shoulder, head, right shoulder. As long as we don't lose our EMAs, we could consolidate and squeeze back up towards 64,000. On Tesla, we have a nice looking setup so far. We're going to see if Tesla could take out this yellow trend line very close to $400. I think 400 to 402 is going to be kind of tough to break. But of all things, Tesla has the potential to do it, especially with SpaceX's IPO. I know there's a lot of hype. There's also hype because there's a lot of talk about how SpaceX and Tesla will likely merge. Why is that? Because Elon Musk wants more voting control over Tesla, especially when they get involved with robotics and such. So if that's the case, that could be another very important catalyst. Just wanted to put that out there for a lot of people out there. Just wanted to say that if Tesla forms an inverse head and shoulders, if we take out 400 to 402, I'm looking for 406, excuse me, 406, and eventually a push back up towards 415 as our targets. I think we could be looking for a bit of a squeeze if we take out resistance, and I think that there is potential in this, but I want to see us hold 400 to 402 first. I want to see us break this yellow trend line acting as resistance. If we do this, I think this could actually squeeze higher tomorrow, but we'll see just to be safe. If we lose 394, we could turn back down on Tesla. I don't want that to happen. I don't really lean in favor of that, if anything. We're going to see if we form a right shoulder first. We could come down first and bounce, but I want to see Tesla hold 394. I want to see it hold support and then break past 400 to continue to squeeze. NVIDIA has a nice looking accumulation, looking for a pushback up to 207, if not as high as 209. There's upside potential. Apple's trying to squeeze. We have a nice looking triple bottom. However, I do not want to see Apple lose 293 now. I want to see it hold above 293. It is consolidating right here, but if we hold 293, we could be squeezing for 298. For other tickers out there, we have Palantir, nice quadruple bottom, looking for a pushback up to 133 plus. AMD is also trying to squeeze. As long as we don't lose 480, we could be looking for a squeeze back up to 500 or so. This is a bullish divergence, but I do not want to see us lose 480. 480 to 481. If we lose this, we turn back down. As long as we hold 480, I could see this continue to squeeze for $500. On ARM, we're looking for a squeeze for 362. On Coinbase, we're looking for an attempt to hold above 160. If we do, we're looking for 162 to 165. On Amazon, we have a double bottom here. As long as we don't lose 240, we could continue to push for 244. On Meta, we're looking for a pushback up towards this 575 area as long as we hold 571. Google's favoring 360. If that breaks, I could see us attempt to push for 364. On Microsoft, we're going to be favoring 394. If that breaks, I'm looking for the higher 390s. Oracle's looking decent. It dumped really hard after earnings only to bounce, and we're actually reclaiming this channel, which could open the doors for 187 to 190. Finally, for a few more tickers, we actually have Netflix, excuse me. Netflix is trying to push for 81 if that breaks. We're looking for 82.5. MSTR might retrace for 118 before attempting to bounce. Celsius is going to be looking for a push for 28.8. Supermicro is going to be favoring a push back up to 34. And then Palantir is looking for a squeeze for essentially 133. Rivian is going to be favoring 16.01. And SoFi is looking for a push back up towards 16.8. Lastly, AMD is going to be looking for a push for 504 to 500 if we hold above this support. MU is now bouncing, but I want to see if this could take out 1,000. It's going to be a tough resistance. If we do break that, I'm looking for 1,020 to 1,030. And then we have Palantir looking for a push for 41.7. And then we're going to see what happens as time goes on. So keep in mind, tomorrow is a big day. The VIX is rejecting so far. It had kind of like a quadruple top rejection, looking for a dip back down towards 19. If that does not hold, we could be looking for the lower 18s. The 10-year is dipping as a result. The dollar got a big rejection, and crude oil is falling as a result of President Trump's announcement that he wants to put an end to the strikes. So interesting news. We're going to see what happens. But so far, considering that President Trump is saying that he wants to cancel the strikes, and considering the hype with SpaceX's IPO, I do think that we could temporarily see some volatility and some upside, but I don't consider this a very sustainable move. I'm not saying this is going to last forever, because what matters more is going to be what happens with the war, what happens with our data, and also what happens involving FOMC. That's going to be the biggest catalyst. I think that matters a lot more. So keep that in mind. These setups are just short term. We'll see what ends up happening. And I wish you all the best as always. Thank you all so much for listening. I'll be back tomorrow before market open for more updates. And once again, if you guys want faster real-time updates from me, if you want to see my live alerts and such, you guys could also check out my Discord link down below. But anyways, that's it for this one. Thank you all so much for listening. I'll see you guys in the next one, and peace out.